Okay. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll, so you'll see this pop up. If you can go ahead and fill this out, why everyone is kind of shuffling in, it'll help us know where you're located, how you identify yourself, if you're a farmer, rancher, ag enthusiast, backyard homesteader, ag service provider, educator. We also have a few questions that will just kind of help us gauge where we're at and how we might kind of tailor some of our questions today as part of our webinar. So everyone should be able to see this. As you come in, you will be on mute and you will be able to chat with each other. So we'll just give a few more minutes while everybody else kind of filters in. Is everybody able to see the poll? Oh, I see that. Okay. Looks like we have a few service providers. We have Maui represented here. I see we have 32 participants so far. So as everyone comes in, we're filling out the poll. I just wanted to explain that we'll be using a Q&A function. This is in addition to the chat. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see some icons. You should see mute, stop video, participants. You'll see a Q&A panel, and this is pretty fun. It's a way to post questions, and participants can actually upvote on those questions. So if somebody poses something that you also, you had a very similar question, you can upvote on that, and that will allow the panelists to view it. You can also use it to ask a question in the middle of a presentation without disturbing the speaker or others. Sometimes you have this burning question and you lose it after the presentation. So this is kind of a lively way to also keep up with the presentations and post some questions. So Louise, are you able to give us a sample question right now? Okay, so viewers, I would like to know if you can see this question. The question is, what is soil made of? As a participant, you should be able to upvote on that. So if you also agree with that, there should be a little thumbs up on the left-hand side, and you should be able to upvote on that. In addition, panelists, are you able to see the questions in the Q&A panel? Does it pop up for you? Okay, so that question can be answered if you'd like by one of the panelists. So you can answer it. We won't answer it live until the end of all presentations when we do our 20-minute Q&A and we really dig in, but you can type an answer there. And once it's answered, it'll go over to this next section, which is answered. So, if panelists, if you'd like to answer that with a typed answer, we can go ahead and just try this out. And I see Jonathan is about to give us an answer here. Also, you can chat amongst yourselves. So the chat is reserved for if you're having any technical difficulties. It'll also be used to kind of track our time. But please, if you have a question that is open to the panelists or has anything to do with the presentation, please post it to that Q&A. It allows us to really see all the questions, organize them, and not lose them. And we'll be saving these and sharing them. We're also preloading some of these questions. You guys did a great job and shared at least one of your big questions of why you're joining us today, one of the questions you really wanted to get answered. So we did save all those. We value your time, and we're going to preload some of those questions as are relevant to the different presentations. Okay. So I can see here that most people have voted. We have, a big representation of Oahu. We have Kauai here. We have Hilo side on Hawaii Island. We have Maui. We have a lot of farmers. We have some ag enthusiasts, a few homesteaders and backyard gardeners. And I see, we have some other panelists. You can kind of read the poll questions here too, as far as what what do the audience today really want to learn from this workshop? So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and get started. Okay, we have no open questions now. Okay, so we went over some housekeeping, so how to use the Q&A panel. The presentation will begin with Michelle. We will go ahead and go through all presentations, and then we'll just really dig in for a 20-minute Q&A at the end. So, you know, we'd really like to welcome everyone, and I think we're a little behind time, but we'll make up for it. So thank you for joining us. This is the first of a four-part workshop series, and we'll be offering this every Tuesday in June. And these workshops are really intended to provide you viewers today a pretty solid understanding of how farmers in Hawaii can better manage the health and the functionality of your soil. And we're just seeing this as a pathway to kind of help you better manage your operation and kind of regenerate some of your on-farm ecosystem services. So my name is India Clark, and I'm the Farm and Community Engagement Coordinator here with Oahu RC&D. We also have Hannah Hubbanks with us. She's our conservation planner specialist. She's worked with a lot of the panelists on our call today. So we've got a nice relationship there. We also have Louise Martin and Augusto DeCantro with us. Let's see. Just to let you know too, we've moved 2 of the workshops to on farm. So we have a few spots left. Those will be also recorded, so our neighbor island folks will still be able to view those. We have a full spectrum of interest out there as looking at the poll, but the objectives for this workshop is really to have you guys walk away with having an increased confidence and an ability to really be able to link soil biology and soil health, and to really understand how that relates to soil fertility, but how it's a little different. Also understand the productivity benefits of improving your soil health and improving the functionality. Being able to understand the importance of monitoring soil health improvements over time. So establishing that baseline, being able to try different practices and then see where you're at. And then kind of be introduced to NRCS's 4 principles to build a healthy soil and start to see some of the steps for starting to develop a soil health management system as part of your operation. And then we'll also learn more about the NRCS in-field soil health assessment guide and understand different applications for farmers. So we'll really dig into this, and we'll actually demo it next Tuesday at Hua Orchards. So let's see, real quick. Let's see. So a little bit about ORCD real quick. Our main focus is really supporting environmental stewardship on working lands. We work with farmers and ranchers. We provide technical assistance, fiscal sponsorship, and then we really facilitate a lot of farmer-to-farmer learning like this workshop today. We cover watershed restoration, soil health, agritourism, and agribusiness. And we are a nonprofit, and although our name is Oahu, we service all islands. So and so one of the main things we focus is on the Women Farmers Network. It is probably our largest farmer-to-farmer learning network, and you know, we're really continuously trialing new practices, and we share that out through platforms like this workshop, but we also share informally with a Facebook group that's now close to 700 members strong, all in Hawaii, all different islands, all different types of operations. And so as we mentioned earlier, this network really grew out of a 2016 needs assessment. And so we've been going this long now, and we've been able to provide some mini grants. We do a lot of inspirational videos. We have some online tools. We do hopefully post, now that we're coming out of COVID, more potlucks and networking events. And so here's kind of just, you know, who we are and what we do. And if you'll notice here, we have a directory. So this is a new kind of project funded by HDOA. And it's online, it's a searchable database. You can see here that you can type in, you know, an address. It's all islands. You can also search by kind of product, or you can also use it to find a mentor. So, you know, this is one of the ways that we're trying to connect farmers with each other. And so this is kind of a fun new product that we've been able to come out with. You do have to be 50% women owned or operated, and women have to have a major leadership role and decision making and their operation to be listed on this directory. So we also have a different tools. So these are online tools. They're really designed to be kind of fun quizzes, and they ask you questions that let you kind of reflect on your own operation. So you'll see here this regenerative agriculture tool. You would click on this. This is just a screenshot from our website. And once you're in, it asks you different questions. It really pulls heavily on the NRCS and-field soil health assessment worksheet that actually Jennifer Moore created before she left at NRCS, and has really been a very helpful tool. So we felt that it has such a great framework that we really had to align with that. And these questions are really based on field observations that farmers make on a daily basis when they work with their soil and water and crops. And they look for indicators of like soil or organic matter depletion, kind of looking for soil organism habitat loss, soil compaction, lack of aggregate stability, looking at field residue breakdown, surface crusting, ponding, and different other indicators in field. We have also included some different resources, both local and both local and national. And so we encourage you, if you can, after the webinar, to go onto our website and try this tool out. It's going to give you a customized list of some soil health goals. Without further ado, I am actually going to stop sharing my screen so that we can have Michelle share with us right now. And we just really wanted to create an intimate and informal setting where, Michelle, you can just kind of open us up and help share your story.
Thanks, India. And as usual, I have to sort of apologize because there's chickens that are laying eggs, so they'll be doing their thing in the background randomly. Aloha, my name is Michelle Galemba, and along with my family, I own and operate Kuahivi Ranch. We produce a grass-fed beef for local markets and restaurants, and a few eggs. Our ranch is located in Ka'u, the district of Ka'u, on the southern tip of Hawaii Island. The wind in Ka'u has a name. It's called Ku'ehulepo, which means the wind that beats up the dust. This name of this wind can tell you a couple of things. Number one, that we have very strong winds here in Ka'u, and also that it's a relatively arid district. So it's prone to drought and dryness, such that the wind beats up the dust. So when I think of soil and dust, actually, I don't really think of it as necessarily something under my feet, because quite often it's literally in my face. This is partly also because, especially on the lower elevations of the ranch, the soil is very light and ashy. It's been deposited by the volcano that is upwind of us for millennia. So this dirt of my district, it has a very distinctive smell. It smells of lava rock and sulfur. It smells of wind, ocean, sunlight. It smells of macadamia nut and coffee orchards. It smells of tall grass and deep forests. When I think of soil, the first thing I think of is not something beneath my feet, but an ambient presence, something that envelops me and that in many ways defines the place that I love. To be honest, I'm feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome opening up this webinar because I actually don't know that much about soil health, especially the science part of it. So I want to start out first by thanking my fellow panelists for their work in research and education on soil health, because it is so important. And I also want to thank the organizers of this webinar because it took a lot of work to make it possible. And it really helps, I think, for everyone to learn more about soil health. So I'm no expert, but I am an enthusiast about soil health. And I know that it is critical to the health of the grasses on my ranch and to the animals that I raise, and therefore to my business as a cattle rancher. The interaction between soil, plants, and cattle is a fascinating one, and how I manage my cattle has a direct impact on soil health and plant communities. I also worry about soil health in terms of nutrient cycling, because right now nutrients leave my ranch every week in the form of beef, but very little of those nutrients come back. It's a one-way journey when optimally it should be more or less of a closed circle that could be sustained indefinitely. This is a problem for my ranch, but it is also, I believe, a problem for our society as a whole. We are not closing our loops in this and many other important ways. We need to become smarter and more subtle in how we as food producers and as food consumers interact with our environment. Aside from being a rancher with a vested interest in soil health, I believe I can also contribute to this discussion a little by being someone trained in the humanities, which is to say someone who's trained to ask questions about context and meaning. Asking why is just as important as asking how. So why should we care about soil health? I would say that caring about soil health is one effective way to address many of the issues of pollution and environmental degradation that beset our society. These issues take a whole host of forms, from localized erosion problems to the global problem of climate change. Soil health is also the foundation of any sustainable agricultural business. Why should we, as women, care about soil health? I would say that possibly we don't need to care about it as women, but simply as farmers and ranchers, which is to say I don't necessarily see soil health as gendered. But at the same time, I think that as women, we might have an affinity to thinking about soil health. Soil health is the basis of a regenerative agriculture. And even more broadly, soil health can be the foundation of a culture and a civilization that is based on regenerative principles. I want to stop right here to acknowledge my mother, who from the start of our ranch in 1993 was passionate about restoring soil health on the sugarcane fields that we began to lease as pastures. She was and still is passionate about pasture design and herd rotation, about planting legumes to fix nitrogen, and about keeping invasive species of plants at bay. Those are some of the most important tools that we as ranchers can use to affect soil health. The idea of soil health as a regenerative network of soil, plants, and animals is something that we as women can resonate with. My mother understood this right from the start. To paraphrase Freya Matthews, a favorite philosopher of mine, we as women resonate with the idea of being invested psychically in the responsive ground of being. The ground, which is to say the soil, responds to our care or our neglect. Its responsiveness calls us to be responsible. Its responsiveness calls us to see the soil not as a thing, but as a being with which we have an important relationship. We owe our allegiance first and foremost, before town, state, or nation, to the dirt. It is our country, our reality, our home. We can build a loving, healing, and responsible relationship to the places we love by being attentive to the soil, to the smell of the dirt of our beloved places, to its winds and its rains. We can take a hint from the soil and build networks like this women farmers network of like-minded people, whether male or female, who share this allegiance to the soil, to the earth, and to a human culture built around regeneration and responsibility rather than exploitation and extraction. Building networks is a powerful way to help each other to reach for something new and different, to reach towards ways of living that are regenerative and responsible and express our allegiance to the earth and to the soil. We are at a crossroads and hopefully a turning point in our history as a species. As Bruno Latour points out in his book, Down to Earth, we are at a moment of choosing sides. We can choose the side of Gaia and a regenerative culture and agriculture where we share the earth and make it possible for all people and species to make a living. Or we can choose the side of escape with its gated communities and private islands, its billionaires dreaming of literally escaping into space, its ever-increasing exploitation of the earth and of our fellow human beings. This is not to say that space programs are wrong or that we shouldn't be seeking knowledge beyond our planet, but it is to say that we must allocate our resources carefully. In my opinion, we should choose the earth and choose Gaia and choose soil networks and human networks. We should choose to prioritize the mundane work of understanding the humble soil beneath our feet, which we can all contribute to, over a glamorous escape to Mars for a few. In other words, this workshop about soil health is about values and about vision. So again, I want to thank all of you who are passionately engaged in the important work of understanding the planet we live on and in trying to understand how to live on it better, more respectfully, more sustainably. The importance of this work cannot be overstated. We have so much to learn about the soil and our proper, respectful, and responsible relationship to it. So thank you very much. And I look forward to learning from everyone else on the panel.
Michelle, thank you so much. Yes, thank you for orienting us. I don't know who else has chicken skin, so thank you. So that's why we're all here, in case we weren't sure, in case we weren't quite awake and our heads and hearts and bodies were not fully engaged yet. Now they are. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Jonathan Denique. He will give us a pretty in-depth presentation. So we charged him with the responsibility of just laying down some of the soil science here, just the foundation. And if you're able to attend all 4 of our workshops, this will be recorded. It'll just give you a really solid foundation so that when we get in the field and when we kind of we'll be assessing in the field, we'll also be doing different practices. We'll be working. You can kind of look at our full workshop announcement, but this is very important just to make sure we're all speaking the same language. This is some education that will be helpful for myself as well. So all panelists will give us a really good foundation, and we'll go ahead and start with Jonathan. He is a specialist with CTAR's Department of Tropical Plant and Soil Science, and his program really focuses on assisting farmers and land managers implement soil management practices, and with the goals of kind of increasing crop production and really, you know, he does a lot with farmers. So we're hoping, Jonathan, at the end, we can really dig in and hear some of the juice on, you know, what are some of the main questions farmers ask you and what do you see? So we're a little behind, so I'm not going to go too much into this, and I'll just share my screen and let you take over.
Okay, well, aloha mai kako. Michelle, thank you for setting the stage for us and bringing us together for Hana Pono, the good work. I want to thank India and my good friend Hannah for inviting me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I will try my best to give a little paina, some foundation. There's much to talk about, but yeah, maybe we go to the next slide real quick. There we go. So, real quick, some understanding of what is soil health. It's going to be a bit of a dry definition, but it sets the foundation. Soil health has many meanings to all of us, and they're all valid and important because we all have a personal relationship with Aina. So this, by no means, there's no one definition of soil health, but to ground us, at least from a science perspective, I'll present one. And then, what is a healthy soil? Are soils equal? Are they equal? That's an important one. I'll show some maps. And then a little bit about managing for soil health. So that's kind of what I'm gonna do, and it'll set the stage for other panelists and other presentations. So let's go to the next slide. So if we were to go and, type in what is soil health, you would see this is something, it's been around for much longer than 1996, I can assure you. People were thinking about soil health in China 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, certainly in other parts of the world, because soil is the foundation to life. But in this sense, let's capacity of a soil to function. We're going to talk about function in a minute. So there's a functionality related to soil health. And we're going to see that it's multifunctional. Soil has many functions, and that it's a vital living system. And as you noted when we began this, I typed in sand, silt, clay, organic matter, water, pore space as a simple definition of soil. And my good friend Jen came in and said, and billions of living organisms. So living system, very important. Many folks, probably not this audience, I'm sure, but many folks don't view soil as a living system. It's dirt. Oh, okay. So, and it's a living system to sustain biological productivity, forests, croplands, grasslands, all manner of, organisms, animals. Maintain environmental quality. So there's a sustainable, the function of the planet depends on soil health, the functioning of our living planet. And it promotes plant, animal, and human health. So there's a direct correlation between healthy soils and healthy living organisms. And I think Michelle nicely, much more eloquently than I could ever dream of, helped us set that stage that we really need to think of it as one with us. Okay, so let's go to the next. Now we're going to get a little technical and some science here, but don't worry about it too much. When we talk about soil, clear to that very simple definition that we began with in the chat, we can see that there's a physical component of soils, there's a biological component of soils, and there's a chemical component of soil. So we can make all manner of measurements to describe the physics of soil, to describe the biology of soil, and to describe the chemistry of soil. And people like us, we love that part of soil, the inquiry and measurement. Soil health integrates all of them. And this is where it's different from, some years ago, 30, 40, 50 years ago, soil scientists were more often concerned with not soil health, but maybe soil productivity, soil fertility as it related to crop production. And so this notion of health wasn't at the center of the discussion, and it increasingly has become the center of the discussion, as it should be. My daughter tells me that a lot, as it should be, Dad. So we have ways of characterizing soil health through the physical, biological, and chemical properties. And the beauty of the notion of soil health is you're integrating all of those important properties. And the physics of the soil directly impacts the biology, because if your pore spaces are compacted or your architecture of your soil is disturbed, you're going to have a negative impact on the living inhabitants of that space. So same with the chemistry. So we can see that there's a science behind this notion of soil health. And we don't say that the science of soil health is more important than the human, our interaction with soil, but it allows us to speak a common language to characterize a soil, which is going to be something we're going to be talking about throughout this workshop, I imagine. Let's move on. Now, so we said that healthy soil is able to function. Well, here's just an example of some of the key functions of soils. Well, we know that soil supports plant growth. Yeah, so you see plant growth there. Soils support nutrient transformation, supply, and retention. Michelle told us something about nutrient cycling. Yeah, that's a word she used. That's related to this. So soils are able to ensure that nutrients flow through the soil and become available for plant use, which then provide the sustenance for our living organisms. Atmospheric interactions, very important. You know, the soil regulates the atmosphere. We've heard much ado about carbon sequestration. Well, the soil is a key mediator in greenhouse gas fluctuations. So, and how we treat that soil has an impact on those gas regulations, okay? It's a habitat for biodiversity. That's the billions of organisms that Jen so correctly told us about. But not just microorganisms. I mean, it's the plethora of life in a soil is truly wondrous. Yeah, wondrous is the right word. And then, of course, it's a platform for human activities. So, you know, we build things on soil, we put roads on soil. Soil has been used as a building material. So it has an engineering property or an engineering function. And then, of course, the water. It's a regulator of water. It not only stores water, but it filters water. And so you can see that without a healthy, functioning soil ecosystem, we have problems. Yeah, they impact our life. Well, go to the next slide, please. So the functionality of soils provide us critical services, yeah, very critical services, from food, fiber, and energy to storage of carbon, yeah, carbon sequestration, to regulation and turnover of carbon, so waste management. We can use soil as a waste management treatment facility. But in and of itself, a functioning soil is recycling both nutrients and carbon. Gas. So I'm not going to spend too much time here, but you can see really without a healthy functioning soil ecosystem, we have environmental problems. And many of us have seen and experienced those very problems as a result of our mismanagement of the soil resource. Next, please. So, you know, a healthy soil, the list can go on and on and on. Here are just some that I picked out of my little brain here. Good soil structure. We can see in many cases, oh, this looks like a good soil. You know, it has good architecture. It has a granular structure. You know, you can see the PEDs. It's not too hard. It's not muddy and falling apart. It's not dust. Yeah, it has an architecture to it. Really, really important. Yeah? It drains well. Yeah, so poor drainage causes many problems, erosion, runoff. Yeah. So drainage is related to that structure, but we not only want a soil to drain water, meaning to percolate and allow that water to move through it, but we want the water to be stored in that soil. And so a healthy soil not only drains and percolates water, but it also stores water. And then sufficient and balanced nutrients are an important aspect of soils that enhance plant growth and crops, for example. But those nutrients should not be excessive. Yeah, there shouldn't be excessive nutrients. And in most natural ecosystems, you don't always have a balanced nutrient suite, but you often don't have excessive nutrients, yeah, because you're not, adding. So this is a tricky one because for crop production, you have to have sufficient and a balanced nutrients. And not all soils in their natural state have sufficient or balanced nutrients. So we manage for this, right? And how we do that is important. Organic matter, critical. In fact, now that I think of this, that should have been the first one. But the next slide, you'll see why it should be the first one. I wouldn't say these are in any order. Yeah, let's do that. We should maybe just take away those silly numbers, yeah? Let's go back real quick, India, before we go to this one. We'll go back to where we were, yeah. So very quickly, so we have organic matter, beneficial organisms, and we get back to Jen's key observation earlier. Not only lots of them, but a diverse suite of these organisms. Resistance to degradation. Healthy soils should have some manner of ability to resist degradation. And also resilience. They can bounce back from a disturbance. So here are just some attributes of a healthy soil. By no means exhaustive. We could add much more here. Let's go back again to the next slide. And I think we need to make the slide full again. I don't know how you do that, but okay. So at the center, really at the center of a healthy soil is soil organic matter. And why I place soil organic matter at the center of soil health and soil function is because soil organic matter really impacts all aspects of soil behavior, physics, biology, and chemistry. So this is a fascinating area of study. We still are discovering and learning more and more about the functionality of soil organic matter in its complex relationships, but it is at the center of soil health. And why I emphasize the center is because soil organic matter is also perhaps the most vulnerable component of soil to bad human behavior. Meaning, if we don't pay attention to soil organic matter, for example, tillage is a common practice in agriculture. Excessive or tillage over and over without some mind to organic matter destroys soil organic matter. And in that destruction of that soil organic matter, the soil loses functionality and becomes degraded. We can manage that. We can manage for soil organic matter. And when you do, you have direct impacts on the physical, biological, and chemical properties of that soil. So I really do want to emphasize the critical importance of soil organic matter and its relationship to soil health and soil function. Next. So, well, it's not so straightforward, unfortunately, because soils are not equal, yeah? And I love the fact that soils are not. We have a great diversity of soils, and Hawaii tends to be, one of the most diverse places in terms of soils on a landscape. We change soil type very quickly. Why? Well, it's because we have this tremendous gradient in rainfall. We have very, diverse topography, and rainfall and topography have an important impact on soil development. Yeah, we also have time. So we go from very young island on Hawaii Island to a relative much older island. It's not that old in terms of the earth, but in terms of for soil development, 5 million to being born is a big change in time. And that's another important aspect of soil development. So here I just want to say that there are certain properties that are inherent to soil, and they come about due to soil formation, pedogenesis. How did that soil form, and in what place is that soil sitting in the continuum of soil development? And so some of the properties of soil that are inherent, that are really based upon its place in the continuum of soil formation and development, are things like texture, the amount of sand, silt, and clay. Human beings don't have much impact on changing that in the human time frame. Now, erosion will change things if you're losing soil. Yeah, but if when you till, the changes are probably not huge. Clay mineralogy, the type of clay, which you'll see in the coming slide, is very important in determining behavior here in Hawaii. The type of clay is a pedogenic property, meaning it's a function of where that soil sits in the weathering scheme. Is it a young soil in a dry environment, or is it an older soil in a very wet environment with a high weathering regime? Will determine what kind of clay you have. And in a minute, I'll share why that's important. Drainage very often is related to this texture and the clay mineralogy, although drainage is actually, although it's an inherent property of soil, it can be easily changed by human behavior. And we think about that when in compaction. Yeah, in our activities on land that compact the soil really affect drainage. But now some soils will resist compaction better than other soils, and it depends on maybe their texture or their clay mineralogy. So you see there is an inherent property there as well. And then soil depth is an important one. Yeah, soil depth, again, erosion can have an impact here. 2 minutes, really? Oh my goodness. Okay, and so then we have dynamic properties. Yeah, let's go on. These are things that can be changed, but I really want to get to some soil maps real quick. So if we look at, although we have many individual soil names across the islands, several hundred, I don't know how many, Amy probably knows better than me, but 100 or more, or maybe even more than that, we can place them in 3 broad groups that help us sort of get a sense for soil function. High activity clay soils, these are the shrink swell, sticky clay soils that you find in the valleys on the dry sides of our islands. Yeah, we call them vertisols and mollisols. Inherently, they have relatively poor drainage. They're sticky, their physical properties are not as apparent and nicely ordered as some of the others, although in their natural condition, they possess very nice properties, but they can be really impacted by tillage, especially under wet conditions. So we have these high activity clay soils. They're naturally fertile, lots of nutrients. The next class are the soils that are more weathered, a little bit sometimes older, but not necessarily older. It's just they've been undergone weathering more intensively. And they have a class of clays called low activity clays, which resist compaction a little bit more. They're red, dark brown red. They tend to be low in nutrients, but they have good physical properties. They drain water well. They can resist compaction much more readily than these high activity clays. And then we have the most wondrous soils on the planet. They cover much of Maui and the Big Island, and we call these the andesols, or these are the soils that develop. They're relatively young, and they develop in volcanic ash. My time is up. Let's go to some maps so you can see real quickly. I'm going to take 1 minute, Michelle or Louise. Go on. Really, 20 minutes went that quickly? My goodness. So go ahead, real quick, let's look at some maps. We have very diverse islands. So you can see on Oahu, we have a lot of low activity clays. That's the red and yellow soils. Those are low activity clays. They're in the higher rainfall areas. And then we have in the lower, drier, more arid lowlands, we have the high activity clays, which are the vertisols and mollisols. And we don't have too many volcanic ash soils, yeah, because we're a little bit too old for that. The volcanic activity was too long. Let's go to Maui, because Kauai and Molokai look very much like Oahu, yeah? You can see similar, but now look at Maui. Yeah, Maui is a beautiful mixture of the volcanic ash soil and so you can see a lot of volcanic ash soils on Maui and Big Island. And they really possess beautiful properties. I'll end here. Sorry, I went over.
Jonathan, I'm not able to use my chat function right now. I'm having some technical difficulties, but if you'd like, I think we can just shorten the 20-minute Q&A, and let's give you another, if we give another 3 to 5 minutes with that. I think you have such important things to share that I wanted to keep your presentation going, but I wasn't able to chat right now. So would that be okay if we
I've got a couple slides. I'll go through them quickly, but they do kind of give us let's go to the next slide after this Hawaii Island one. I'll go quickly through it. So management, well, in a natural state, many soils, we would say they possess good soil health. Most, if they're in their natural state, grassland, forest, they may not be perfect for agriculture. They may have some nutrient imbalances. They might even have some toxicities, because they're very acid, but they're functioning. Yeah, their physical, chemical, and biological components are functioning, supporting a forest or supporting a grassland or whatnot. As soon as we bring cultivation in, we begin to degrade a soil. And the reason being is that we reduce the amount of organic matter, typically. That's the first and most dramatic impact on the functioning of a soil, is the loss of soil organic matter due to conventional tillage practices. Okay, go on. So now we can enter into this degrading agriculture. Here I just have some local data from Hawaii, where we might take a vertisol, which is a high activity clay. This is the kind of soil that you typically find at places like Ma'o Farms on Oahu or Kahumana Farm on Oahu. And it's not present on Maui or Big Island. They're still too young, but you'll find some vertisol and high activity clays on Kauai as well. And they're typically grassland soils under their natural state, or open savanna. Yeah, we don't know the exact composition, but organic carbon is not necessarily very high in these soils because it's a dry environment, but in a typical grassland, unmanaged, 2.5%, you go to a conventional green onion farm adjacent to this grassland where we know cultivation hasn't occurred for, the entire history of that land, and you see you really reduce organic matter tremendously. Now, you can take that same soil that at some point was under conventional agriculture, and then it transitioned into organic farming. And this is an example of Ma'o Farms, who inherited a relatively degraded vertisol because it was in truck farming for 50 years prior to their coming there. And over 20 years, they've been able to upgrade that soil by adding compost and organic matter. You can see that you can even make a soil in terms of its biological life. If we just measured the CO2 burst, which is a way of getting gross biological activity in that soil, it's certainly not a very refined measurement, but it just tells you how alive is that soil. It gives you an indication. You can see that the grassland soil had a value of 40. That's probably typical for that kind of unmanaged soil. The conventional farm had very little carbon dioxide of evolution, meaning not much activity, biological activity in the soil. But you go to the Ma'o farm fields where they've been adding a lot of organic matter for the last 20 years, and you've really built up the biology of that soil by changing your practice, adding organic matter. And the same thing goes for water stable aggregates. You can see the same trend. Under the natural condition, you have about 50% water stable aggregates, and then you till it to death in a green onion farm and it goes down, but you put organic management practices on that land, on those fields, and you can build the aggregate stability back up. So it gives you, we can measure these changes, you know. What it tells us is that soils will respond to good management. They will respond. You know, once you have a degraded soil, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. You can build that soil back up. So next slide, I think we can do the same thing in a oxisol, which is a low activity clay, and you can see the same, the numbers might be a little bit different, but you can see the same sort of behavior, yeah? Heavy conventional agriculture tillage, you reduce your health of your soil, you impose some good practices that include organic matter especially, and you can build that soil back up. And then the next slide, it's most dramatic actually when you go to these andisols. Yeah, the differences are really striking. So if you're not managing that soil well, you really have a tremendously negative effect on the chemistry, physics, and biology of that soil. Now, we're going to be working much more closely with farmers on Big Island, especially with Amy's assistance, to get a much broader representation of data to help us characterize management on the andisols. So we don't have any organic farms here, you see, but that's coming, right? Next year, we'll have data to present to you. All right, I think I'll end at the next slide. I'll end. No, go to this one. My good friends, Jen and Amy, are going to really help us understand what are good practices. I just had that in there just to help us. But the next slide is really to make a difference is to work with farmers. And although I don't do as much as I used to, the most valuable work that us soil scientists can do is to make sure we're out in the fields with our growers to help measure and allow those measurements to speak, to promote good practices. So I do a lot of this. I used to do more. I became a department chair. That was a very unfortunate event in my life, but it's only temporary. So I should be back out in the field soon. I've worked with many, many farmers around the state and throughout the Western Pacific, and there's much hope because of all of you. So mahalo ya'oko. Sorry, I was a little not too good on time management. That's one of my challenges.
No, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we were able to dig into those slides, and I think we learned a lot. We did start a little late, so Louise, thank you for adjusting, and yeah, so thank you once again. So we have Jennifer Moore is next. She is a research soil scientist with USDA ARS's program. She's also served as NRCS's Western Region Soil Health Team Leader and the NRCS Liaison for the USDA Northwest Climate Hub. She's co-authored many publications and press articles on soil health management, carbon cycling, and microbial ecology. And she was actually elected the 2017 Chair of Soil Biology and Biochemistry Division for the Soil Science Society for America. She also holds a doctorate in soil science from Oregon State University. And I apologize that I wasn't able to give a full bio introduction for other panelists and speakers. I was having technical difficulties this morning. Jennifer, I'll let you go ahead and dive into helping us understand soil health assessment and the importance of monitoring soil health improvements over time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Aloha. Thank you, India, for the invitation to be here today. And thank you to the other presenters already for their knowledge, expertise, and insights. I'm really humbled to be part of this great panel. Today, I'm just going to provide a really high-level overview of the in-field soil health assessment. I believe next week you're going to be able to get into the field and be guided by local experts to help you actually physically do the assessment. But it was part of something that I had worked on prior to my leaving NRCS a few years ago. So I'm really excited to see it's being adopted widely by NRCS, and hopefully we can work together to try to design and tweak it to modify for Hawaii. And then also to discuss the importance of overall soil health monitoring. So next slide, please. So there are a number of different ways to go about developing a soil health management plan. One strategy is provided here, and it's an integrated approach. And as both speakers before me have emphasized, that soil and farming, it's an ecosystem unto itself. And so we can't think about just changing one practice and then not having it influence all of these other components in the soil, the physical, the biological, the chemical, the crop productivity, et cetera. And so to be able to develop a strategy, you have to first start with knowledge and understanding the management history of your field. What types of soils, what is your climate, what resources do you have available to you? To know if the plan you develop is effective, it's important to establish where you are. So you must conduct an initial assessment. Today we'll get a preview of the in-field soil health assessment, but as Jonathan already shared with you, there's lots of laboratory assessments that can also be conducted to give you a better sense of where are you at. Once you develop your baseline, you can then try to project where you might go with the different practices as you develop your soil health management system. So following the initial assessment, it's also important to understand what thresholds exist. How high can you go? There's a maximum level that all soils can achieve for acquiring soil carbon and organic matter. And you're not going to necessarily change your ultrasol or oxisol into a mollisol, but you can change certain properties. And as Jonathan alluded to, adding organic matter and building organic matter is one of the best ways to improve just about everything in your soils. So there are ways to accommodate it no matter where you are. And then once you kind of acquired the knowledge, the history, the management, you've done your initial assessment, you know what your thresholds, your boundaries are, then you can work together with local experts and your colleagues to develop management strategies, and really recommend trying to identify both short and long-term goals to help you set yourself up for success. And then once you implement those management practices, it's important to go back in and assess, see how are you doing? Are you on that trajectory, or did something really out of the ordinary, a major drought or crazy weather patterns happen that offset that whole strategy and threw you for a loop? Sometimes also just looking at your management. Did you set the drill too shallow to not get that good seed to soil contact? Was your timing off for your termination of your cover crop? There's lots of things that can go awry that maybe with further modifications will set you up for success in the future. So it's really important to not just give up if failure has happened, but to me, I think if we haven't failed, we can't move forward. And so our mistakes sometimes can lead us to the best solution. So don't give up, but to reassess and adapt. Next slide, please. The value of soil health monitoring. So knowledge is power. There's a really great quote by a Senegalese environmentalist in the 1960s, Baba Diem. He wrote, "In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught." And recognizing that how we are taught, it comes in very different ways, right? There's the academic way that we're sharing with you today. There's on the ground experiential ways that I think farming is just naturally designed, peer-to-peer, communication, listening to what the soil is telling us and your plants and the animals and the environment, all really help to teach us, not just in a PowerPoint like we're sharing today. And I think when you monitor your soil, you create an awareness and you begin to understand how your system is working. And then that leads to new questions and thinking outside the box. And that's where the novel and the creative approaches can come into play that really help propel agriculture forward. It also validates that the practices that you are investing a lot of your time and your energy and your money are having the intended impact on your system. It identifies new opportunities that I talked about. You can compare notes with neighbors and share learning. Again, these networks are an amazing way to help build that and help shortcut the learning process, if you will, with sharing experiences, both successes and some of the challenges. Getting on the map on the upper right-hand corner, there's a map of the US with some dots on it, and NRCS is building a platform that enables farmers and landowners to come in and put their in-field soil health assessment results on the map. There's no dots on Hawaii yet, so hopefully maybe you guys can help lead the way. And then bragging rights, right? You can be like, look how much I've increased my organic matter, my aggregate stability is improving, my productivity, et cetera. And sometimes that can just make you feel good and help inspire the next wave. Next slide, please. So searching for signs of a healthy soil. Again, today, let's just focus on some of the things we can see with our senses, our sight, our touch, our smell even, and we'll kind of go through that. Next slide. So again, prior to leaving NRCS a few years ago, we developed what's called an in-field soil health assessment. It's originally designed to help conservation planners establish whether there's a soil health resource concern. And Amy knows much more about this than I do, but they need that resource concern to then develop the plans for a given farm. I would propose that with some modifications and working with local experts in the area, you could take this platform and design it to be able to use on your own farm and track over time to see how your improvement is. Currently, it's designed as a yes/no kind of answer. Yes, you have the problem, or no, you don't. But you could, even within your own, own knowledge and expertise, develop, for example, a ranking system, 1 to 5. So you might be a 2 to start with, and you would still check, yes, I still have this concern next year, but maybe you move to that 3 or 4 over time. So the great thing about this in-field assessment, it requires no expensive equipment. Sure, you can buy expensive, fancy equipment to do some of these tests, but you don't need to. They're simple. There are multiple indicators for various functions of the soil. And then there's a whole suite of questions that we provide that help guide you through the process as well. So let's look at some of the signs. Next slide, please. So some of the field conditions you want to avoid are shown in this slide. Of course, any increased ponding and or visible soil erosion, dust, wind erosion. I think Michelle alluded to the winds in her part of Hawaii and the negative impacts that can have. Also, water erosion is a big problem. You also want to avoid seeing any big cracks in your soils. Now, in some of your vertisols, that's a tricky thing because they are naturally shrink swell soils and they are prone to cracking. But some of those other soils, if you see cracking, it's definitely a sign that there's a problem. In the middle, J roots, that's a big sign that you've got a compaction problem. Just below it is an example of soil texture that's called platy texture, and you'll be guided through that process in the field next week. But you want to avoid the plates, and it literally looks like compressed plates, one on top of another in the field, and that's typically a sign that you have some some compaction problems. And then there's different ways to look at wet aggregate stability in the field. A slake test is in the upper right corner. You want your soil to stay together and not fall apart when it's immersed in the water, as opposed to the right-hand side where it just completely disaggregates and it falls apart. And that is what then is runs off the field, and the sediment and potential chemicals that move off field and then into waterways can damage the aquatic systems, which in your part of the world are so important to the livelihoods and the ecosystem. The bottom one is a slump test, and that's another way to get at aggregate stability as well. Yep. And then the next slide, good. Field conditions you want to see, 30 seconds, holy cow. All right, you want to see good aggregation. You want to see dark soils. You want to see rich, vibrant, active biological life. I don't know if earthworms are native there, but if you have them and they're native, no, don't want to see worms then. But other critters, beetles, centipedes, all the creepy crawlies, when you see these larger organisms, you know that they're supporting the system and the smaller microorganisms behind them. Typically, they're the first populations to be reduced dramatically under conventional agriculture. So if you see them, it's typically a good sign. Next slide. Next, please. Uh-oh. Well, the next slide I can describe, there we go, describe for you. There are 3 different categories of the field indicators that you'll learn about. Surface indicators, how much cover is there, whether there's crusting, how rapidly the residue is breaking down, if there's ponding. Some of the physical properties include penetration resistance, which you can use with a penetrometer or simple wire flag. Looking at structure, the platy versus granular, soil color, aggregate stability, and of course erosion. And then biological, looking for biopores, root depth and distribution, and biological activity. These are all things that you're going to be trained on next week. And there are guides. If you're not able to go into the field, I put the references and the websites that you can go to learn about those. This is just a snapshot screenshot of the worksheet that you'll be using. And this kind of illustrates the yes, no, but I would encourage you to consider some kind of ranking to help guide you over time. And the last slide. Important considerations. The guide kind of goes through this. There's different sampling times that are important for different indicators, but be consistent. Pay attention to your timing. Sample at the same time points each year. Use a soil map and get to know your soils before you go out. Keep a journal, take pictures, talk, and just keep track of things. And you're going to amaze yourself at how much you're going to learn about your soils and what your management is doing. And with that, I am out of time. Oh, trust your senses. I'll just give a shout out to the smell that I think Michelle alluded to. We used to have that in our guide. Earthy, sweet smell is always a good thing. Anything else is not good. So thank you. And then the last slide is just my contact information. Mahalo, thank you, and welcome any questions, and feel free to reach out to me anytime. Thank you.
Mahalo, Jennifer. That was a great presentation. I can't wait for us to get out in the field. Thank you for developing that guide. It really helps just kind of help you know where to really start with assessing and monitoring. I want to welcome Amy Coach. She's Assistant Director for Soil Science with the NRCS here in the Pacific Islands, and she's based out of Hilo. She has worked with NRCS for over 15 years. I think most of us know Amy, and we're very grateful to have you. She did earn her bachelor's degree in environmental science from Virginia Tech, and she has a master's in soil science from Utah State. And her presentation will introduce really the framework for soil health that NRCS is using, and the principles to build really the principles behind that, and the steps for integrating that all into a soil health management system. We were having some technical difficulties. My screen was freezing. We're going to not be able to do a lot of Q&A, but I'd really encourage everyone to use the Q&A panel on the bottom so that we can go ahead and post a few questions. You should be able to upvote now, and hopefully we'll have a few minutes though for some burning questions. So Amy, I'll let you go ahead and get to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, India. I'm not seeing my slides yet. Yeah, if you can go to the second one. Perfect. Thank you. Yes, so thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I get very excited about talking about soil health, as any of you who do know me are aware. And I will say I do have free range chickens as well. I have a rooster that gets very excited about soil health, so you might hear him pipe in from time to time. So bear with me. The people that went before me laid a beautiful foundation and of kind of why we're here, what soil health is, what soil is to different people, to our senses. And so we're slowly progressing closer and closer to actually getting to the soil, right? And getting to actually start doing something to address soil health concerns. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the NRCS framework for addressing soil health. So 4 principles to building healthy soil, trying to keep it, of course, there could be many more, but just trying to keep it as simple as possible of what to focus on to optimize healthy soil. And then steps to developing a soil health management system. And a little bit, Jen already talked about that and kind of what a system is. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Next slide. So how do we manage for better soil health? Obviously, if you're at this webinar, it's something that you must be interested in. So we've kind of have the theory and the what is soil health. We've had that conversation. So now we're going to talk about some core principles, which are ideas or ways to follow kind of the concepts of soil health. And then those are going to move into practices that then address each of those principles. And then as we continue to build and grow, the optimal level of soil health is going to be achieved with a soil health management system, which is going to incorporate everything together in one happy package. Next slide. So what are the 4 principles to improve soil health? Number 1 is to keep the soil covered at all times. And we're going to go through all of these in a little more detail in the future slides, but that can be cover crops, mulch and residue, and even your cash crops or grass in the case of grazing. Principle number 2 is to maximize diversity. So that can be different types of cover crops and what we call a cover crop cocktail. It can be also just by having different kinds of crop rotations or rotating a cover crop in with your cash crop. Number 3 is to keep living roots in the soil. So active soil is healthy soil. We have to feed all those billions of living organisms. They're very hungry critters, especially here in the tropics. So when we have those living roots, it's kind of like icing on the cupcake. It gives them a little bit extra nutrient and makes them extra happy. Number 4 is to minimize soil disturbance. As Jonathan talked about, anytime the soil is disturbed, especially through tillage, it's going to have an impact on the soil. So we want to minimize that disturbance to protect soil biology and structure. And I just want to note that these principles, while for the most part, we tend to, apply these in a typical traditional cropping system, they can apply elsewhere. We have a lot of orchards here. They can be applied there, even agroforestry systems, as well as grazing operations. Okay, next slide. So this is kind of what we just talked about, and it takes all of the different principles and puts them into a kind of categories. So you see on the left side of the circle, by maximizing continuous living roots and maximizing biodiversity, those are going to help us to feed and fuel the soil biology. All those critters and organisms that are doing amazing things for the soil are hungry, so we want to make sure that we feed them. On the right side, you'll see minimizing disturbance and maximizing soil cover. That's going to help protect the soil aggregates, or the architecture, as Jonathan called it. I really like that term. Protecting the organic matter so it's not going to volatilize to the atmosphere and be lost. And to protect the soil biology, right? When we're standing outside on a hot, sunny day, would you rather stand in the hot sun or be under the shade of a cool tree? The soil biology feels the same way. They want to have a little bit of cover to keep them cool. All right, next slide. So just a little bit more about each principle and then the practices that we have at NRCS that are used to address the principle. So keeping the soil covered at all times, residues, mulches, live plants, whether that be your cash crop, cover crop cocktail. Some of the practices include cover crops, soil carbon amendment, which is an interim practice that we're just kind of now exploring, but that includes different types of soil carbon amendments, so different mulches, as well as biochar, which is kind of a new topic, and we're really excited to explore that more here in Hawaii. And then mulching. And so when soils are covered, they're cooler, it conserves moisture. So if you're irrigating, you don't have to irrigate as much. You're gonna help suppress weeds. And again, feeding that soil biology. You're gonna see that over and over again. Those little critters do so much to improve soil health, so we wanna make sure we keep them happy. Next slide. So maximizing diversity. So this is going to be achieved through crop rotation. So that could be having different kinds of crops at different parts of the year. Also introducing a cover crop into your crop rotation. Oftentimes farmers may want to do that at a time that they know their cash crop wouldn't be quite as productive. And so they have a little bit of time to play with. Cover crop cocktails are a fun way of adding a bunch of different cover crop species together to achieve even greater results. And keeping in mind that that diversity can be spatial or temporal. So temporal would be the crop rotation over time, but even spatial, by having a diversity, if you're doing truck crops, you know, you have a rows of different kinds of crops, and maybe even adding in a row of a pollinator flower or something that's going to attract those beneficials to your area that you're growing your cash crops. Practices for this include cover crop and crop rotation. And again, just noting that by maximizing this diversity, we're going to support and enhance the biological diversity in the soil. And then that in turn is going to enhance nutrient cycling. Next slide. Okay, so number 3, keep living roots in the soil. So what's the difference between just adding mulch, which is an organic matter, versus having actual living roots to cover the soil and provide that food? So the roots, actually, there's root exudates that are like little sugars that come off of the root and continue to come off the root because it's a live plant. And it's going to feed and stimulate the soil biology. So active soil is healthy soil. Some of the things that can address this is practices include cover crops and conservation cover. All right, next slide. Oh, next. There we go, number 4. So number 4 is to minimize soil disturbance. You know, we kind of talked a little bit about that with Jonathan. So tillage is not your soil's friend. It's going to break down your soil structure or that architecture. Your soil's not going to hold together as well. If you think of those two soil aggregate pictures that Jen shared, where one just fell apart in the water and the other one held together. You're going to increase your soil respiration rates because you're going to be stressing out all your little microbes that are living in the soil. One thing that is interesting is you can actually shift the diversity or decrease the diversity, and shifting from a soil biology, shifting the soil biology to a bacterial dominated versus having more of those beneficial fungi and actinomyces. So then it reduces the diversity, and you're not having those living roots. And you're going to expose the soil surface. So you'll notice it says minimize soil disturbance. Obviously, no-till would be the practice that's the gold star standard that we want to achieve, but reduced till is a start. And so remember that everything is kind of a stepwise process. All right, next. So Jen gave a great overview of what a soil health management system is. It's a collection of NRCS conservation practices that are going to address not just the soil health principles, but also producer objectives and resource concerns. you're going to be looking both at those short-term results as well as your long-term sustainability. We don't expect that you're just not going to use your soil, and soil is livelihood, right, when you're a farmer. And so it's finding that happy balance of taking something, but then also, putting it back. And importantly, also supporting the continued capacity of a soil to function as a vital living ecosystem. Next slide. So this just shows some of the different soil health principles crossed with the conservation practices that address those. So you can see how you can kind of mix and match those to build a soil health management system to address all or as many soil health principles as possible. Next slide. So these are just some of the components. I am out of time, but basically just remembering that it's an iterative approach that's going to kind of be comprehensive in looking at everything that you need to function on your farm to make it a sustainable, but yet productive operation. And it does include a soil health assessment that we're going to talk about and you're going to get to do next week. Last slide, I think it is, Nia. So just wanted to bring this up one more time of kind of why we're doing this. We have the different soil health principles. We want to protect those soil aggregates, the organic matter, and we also want to feed and fuel our soil biology. So thank you very much. It's hard to fit everything into 10 minutes, but hopefully this helps a little bit too. And you'll learn a lot more next week when you get into the actual soil health assessment.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I think we do have about 3 minutes to ask some questions. We will look at the Q&A for some questions. We did have one that came in first though. So it's basically, the realization that soils are so variable here in Hawaii. I know, Jonathan, you touched on that quite a bit. Is there a low-tech strategy that can help all soils of the islands? And is there an affordable way to do it? And where do you start? So I'd like to open this to all panelists. If whoever would like to answer it, we can just have one answer and then we can go on to another question. So. Don't be shy.
Well, I think I'll just take a stab at it. I think one of the start to think about how to build or maintain enhance soil health is to pay attention to organic matter. If you can, add it. Now you have to choose the right kind so that gets, but organic matter really is paying attention to organic matter is probably the simplest place to start. And, if you don't have to till, don't till. And I think Amy mentioned again, cover. A living cover is best. So those are all pretty low tech. It's just, finding whether you have access to organic matter. Are there composts around? You can make your own compost, but sometimes that's not so possible if you have a lot of land. But paying attention to the organic matter of your soil is, I would say, number one.
Absolutely, I agree. It's so important because, all the things you talked about. And I guess something else to consider is, thinking in the terms of the soil health management system. It could be a stepwise approach, right? You may start with adding organic matter in the form of the compost and continuing to incorporate that into your rotation over time, while also then coming and following that with live roots. Through cover crops and your cash crop. And definitely, we've had farmers that, we found out they were tilling or disking just because that's what you do. And I wanted to suppress the weeds, the farmer said. And it's like, oh no, we'll just leave the weeds, or hey, how about, putting in this cover crop if your field's going to be fallow, instead of going in and disturbing it every few weeks. and losing so much. And so it was a success story that we were able to get that farmer on board, and we used some cover crops, and in a very short amount of time, there were noticeable differences in the soil quality and the soil health.
Okay, thank you. So, I think we're really hearing about, ways to improve soil structure and organic matter, how to keep a living root in the ground, how to keep the soil covered. Those basic principles can help us really try to get towards a transition away from tilling. I know a lot of farmers do it when you're trying to work with, heavily compacted soil and drainage. So I guess a question is really, we had a lot of questions about compacted soils, and just trying to understand specifically, if you're dealing with soil compaction, how do you get off? What would be a couple steps to transition off from tilling? If you just have a really hard clay to work with, what would that transition be like?
I'm not sure how they.
Jonathan's smiling.
How they grow there.
Let's have Jennifer. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Jen. I don't know how well they grow there, but the different tillage radishes are really great.
Yep.
Also, just diversifying the root structure is going to help break up the compaction. There's even different grasses that can help kind of break through certain compacted zones, and so trying to identify those plants that can penetrate down and break up that subsurface is really one path, because then that also builds organic matter. As everybody keeps saying, it kind of all comes back to organic matter. So those two strategies over time will help to increase the friability, the tilth of your soil, and reduce the compaction. But it takes time. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we have we're about out of time. I guess we can add one more question though. Is if it's easy to answer, is there one question that you get from farmers a lot? So anyone can answer, and you can each answer if you want. But is there a question that you hear quite a bit, just to help farmers on this call maybe identify?
I guess one of the
or
most
maybe
common
there isn't
ones
one common
is,
question that you hear. It's all
why should I do
situational.
this? Yeah, why should I do this? Why are you telling me that I need to change, my function? And so my answer, I guess, you didn't ask for an answer, but I'll give you one, is trying to help people understand that we're moving from using soil as a transactional item of what can my soil do for me for the next crop, for the next 6 weeks, the next 6 months, to having that long-term outlook of also making sure, yes, I am going to get my cash crop in, but guess what? If you do these other things, you're going to see an increase in your yield. You're going to see an increase in your profitability over time because of this investment that you make in your soil, and it's going to continue to thrive and provide for you, and you're going to come out ahead. But that's hard to communicate that, and we're working to have more data behind that to be able to show the economics of soil health and how we can put money where our mouth is. It's easy to stand up and tell people to do something, but to have that those success stories will be really helpful.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I think that was a great answer. I think it really kind of summarized some of the main points we met, which is really this is a paradigm shift in the way that we see our soil and understand it, and the way that that we don't just have this take kind of relationship and just focus on the productivity of the crops. So I think this is a pretty exciting endeavor to be taking on with our network. And I just really want to thank our speakers. It's a lot of work to put all this information together. I think you took us on a really good, give us a good foundation, and we're excited to get in the field next week. I want to give a big mahalo also to our sponsors. And those who are able to attend all 4 of our workshops, we will be giving away some raffles. So we have some raffles from allow seed and supply. We're talking about cover crop. We could actually outfit you with some seed. Also EM Hawaii, Solvita, they actually do different respiration tests that we'll get to demo at Kahumana on the 15th. Moku Kitchen, nice on this soil health series. Here are some different opportunities. I know we're over time, so I won't get into it too much, but there is some opportunities to connect nationally as well with other soil health networks. So if we want to go deep and really geek out on soil health and really start trialing and sharing, and as Jennifer mentioned, really taking the time to consistently assess and monitor our soil health and the results of our practices. There'll be some opportunities over the next few years. I hope you can join us tomorrow. We do have, I think, 2 or 3 spots open. It's at Hua Orchard. So we will be in person. We're very excited to have Remy host us. Please visit our website. This is where you registered for this workshop. You can register for these 2 on-farms. For those who are not on Oahu, we will be recording this and we will post this up. So we apologize that we won't be offering these virtually, but the 22nd will be our final virtual workshop. Here's our contact information. And again, thank you for joining us. Please check out our online directory. Please join our Facebook page. Just start trying practices and sharing. And so thank you very much. I'll go ahead and adjourn unless we have any final questions or no. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Thank you. For those that are still on, we did have another poll. We could, we will be answering some of the questions that were posted. And if you haven't tried out our soil health tool, I'd recommend just going to our website and giving that a try. So thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and shut us down.